This is Christine Clapp. I'm the founder of Spoken with Authority, and I'm here today with a handful of my amazing presentation skills coaches, and we are focusing on authenticity. One of the biggest questions that our clients have had since we've gone into this work from home situation during COVID is, how can I be my authentic self and express that over a technology-mediated format? Today, we're doing a panel discussion to crowdsource some great ideas from our team. And right now we have on the line Lisa and Lynn and Jean and Christina, and we're hoping that our coach Bjorn can make it back in the call as well. So right now, I'll just hand it over to Lisa. Tell us about some of the strategies or suggestions that you would have on authenticity.
Sure. The thing that I have really noticed the most in this COVID time where we're spending so much more time in virtual formats is that the people who seem really successful and confident to me are people who don't pretend that the situation is anything other than what it is. Virtual is different, and it has some unique benefits, and it has some unique challenges, and it requires pretty specific things from participants. So I'm really noticing that if we just don't let it be the elephant in the room, call it what it is, I think people will end up in a more comfortable space, a more authentic space. So part of that has to do with how we set things up front in those first couple of minutes. And so I find that people who say, what do participants need to do? What am I going to do as a presenter that's going to make this go well for everybody? Then we all know where we stand and what's expected. So that is laying clear groundwork. It's maybe interjecting some guidance, interrupting along the way to say, I'm just going to mute everybody right now so that Lynn and Jean and Christina can weigh in on this question that we're addressing, and then I'll unmute you all and we can move on. Saying what we're going to do, announcing what we're going to do, and then doing it. And I think the hitch to that is the same thing that we say really to all presenters, which is that we don't have to apologize. I don't have to apologize for what I need to do. I just need to tell you what I'm going to do and let that happen. And then we all know where we stand. I need to troubleshoot the sound, or I need to, I don't know, wait for this presenter's system to start working again. And I guess I would say, so it's all tied to the things that we do as presenters anyway. So there's that in the moment advanced planning, but even before we walk into a setting, if you're a presenter and you can be in touch with the coordinators of an event to say, what expectations do we need to set up for people? So let's agree, for example, that everybody's going to turn their camera on in advance, or let's agree that everybody's going to be on mute except when they're speaking. So again, acknowledging up front, doing the work on the front end, and acknowledging that that space is a real people-to-people, real people interaction, just like it would be if we were in the room together, and that everybody's doing everything they can to make it feel that way. So I have to tell the story of a recent situation where I was co-teaching with another trainer, and we had decided that we were going to break a really large group into two, and everybody had to give these brief presentations. And we did a tech run-through, and when we got to the tech run-through, they said, well, once you get into those breakout rooms, the cameras won't work. We said, well, that's a deal breaker. We can't really have these people do presentations in breakout rooms where they can't see each other. So we had the good fortune of this conversation in advance. We were able to set up a whole new meeting. It was technically messy. People had to sign out and they had to sign back in, and people had to go into different meetings. But everybody gave their presentations and everybody could see each other and they got the feedback they needed. And it happened because there was clear communication and some good conversation on the front end about how to make it work. And so, Christine, I think I was telling you this the other day. As I'm thinking about this question, I found myself thinking about The Wizard of Oz and that phrase, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But I think the fact of the matter is we all know that there's somebody behind the curtain, even if it's me, even if I'm presenter and tech person, we know that somebody's there doing that work. And so I think if we can just acknowledge that that's going on and reassure people that what that means is that somebody is on task to make sure that things go as well as they can go. So that's kind of what's been on my mind with virtual presenters in the last couple of months.
Thanks, Lisa. I love that idea of doing the tech run through so that you could be more authentic. I liked how you framed it in terms of, okay, we might have to have a little bit of a messy situation to have the outcome that we want, to have the experience we want people to have, and just to tell them, yeah, this wasn't exactly what we wanted, but we're going to have to press on. I also think that doing those tech run-throughs allows you to be authentic because you're not as worried about how the technology will unfold. Because if you hadn't have done that run-through and you had to do that breakout session problem in the moment, it would have been completely just anxiety provoking for many speakers, and you couldn't be yourself. So I think that having less anxiety about how the technology works and just knowing where you're going allows you to be present in the moment and be more your authentic self as well. So I like that observation. Thanks for sharing it. Lynn, tell us about your observations on being authentic in a virtual world.
I'm sorry, this is going to have to be so incredibly short, but mostly I'm endorsing everything that Lisa said. I think that people do better when they practice up front, which is the same thing that we always tell our coaching clients anyway. I think that people need to be comfortable in their environment, which is another reason why you need to practice. So you're not standing, but you want to be sitting someplace where you are comfortable, that you can breathe, and be prepared for that. You also have to be prepared for how you interact with screens, with the Brady Bunch screen. Sometimes some people will look directly at the camera, as I'm doing now, and some people may need to go through the squares and kind of get a sense of how people are reacting and responding. You have to know what your style is and what it is for each situation. In my classroom setting, I am always scanning the room because I'm trying to see how things are landing. I also think that people need to be prepared to speak succinctly. Again, we say that in our coaching preparation, but Zoom meetings are difficult and they require a lot of us. There's a lot just to have this light in your face and to be looking at a camera this way. It's draining. You have to be prepared for that, and you don't want to drag that out. And with that, I'm going to have to go. So.
Thank you so much. Lynn is heading off to teach. She's a professor, and we wish you the best with your class. Thank you so much for your insights. And
Thanks.
now, Jean, what about you and authenticity?
Well, I saw someone post something recently that resonated with me, and it talked about how you need to be aware of your image and do some due diligence, which to me is always a way of showing respect for your audience, right? That I've prepared and that I'm giving a professional appearance and those sorts of things. But that obsessing over that is when you start fading into that sort of inauthentic mode. So when everything's too perfectly curated and you're overdoing the attire when everyone knows that you're really at home, that's when you can come across as inauthentic. So I think it's like a lot of things, it's about just finding that balance and really being yourself, especially in the professional settings. But I have to tell you, I had one other experience during the pandemic where I attended a Zoom homeowner association meeting. And it was interesting because we never want people to read to us. But there was one individual who said, I know this is going to be a long call and I want to be really clear and short, so I've prepared and I'm going to read you some remarks. And did that, and I appreciated it. There were some people who were maybe more authentic in a way in that they weren't using notes, but they were also rambling and taking a long time and hard to follow. And so I felt like, I guess it goes back a little bit to what Lisa said about just telling people what you're going to do. And if you need to refer to notes, tell them, I want to make sure I'm not missing something. Let me double check my note here, instead of trying to sort of, look to it. And when you're on camera, that is magnified, right? When your eyes dart, it's so much more obvious than even when you're in a big room with people. So I think that being prepared, but also acknowledging I've prepared, and part of that preparation was preparing some notes that I might use a little bit. People might even appreciate that sometimes.
Absolutely. I love that idea of just being overt about what it is that you're doing, whether it's, like Lisa said, here are the speakers that we'll talk to, or I'm going to mute these folks, or I wanted to be really clear and I'm going to read you my remarks so I don't miss anything and so I'm quick. I think that's a really great idea. And I think it reminds me of my conversation with a woman who helps people land jobs. So she does career coaching and job interview coaching. And when we were writing the new book, Presenting Virtually, I called her and interviewed her because I wanted to know the latest on virtual interviews, and she lives it and breathes it. And one of the things she said is that she recommends that when people are interviewing for a job, that they say, I just wanted to let you know that as you're speaking, I'm going to be writing down some notes about our conversation so that I can make sure that I am understanding you and I have a good memory of what we talked about. And if there's anything that we didn't talk about, I have that so that when they're going like this, it doesn't look like they're people know that they're not checking their phone or not paying attention. So I love that. Just be overt if you're going to do something so that people don't misconstrue what it is. And so you aren't trying to pull off something that isn't, right? When your eyes dart away, people know you're looking at your notes anyways.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Jean. Now let's hear from Christina on authenticity in the virtual environment. And Michelle is here. So Michelle, we'll have you go after Christina.
Okay,
Great to see you.
great to be here.
Well, one of the things that I'm actually really excited to see now, maybe didn't come across in the best way via the pandemic, but one of the things that I'm really happy to see, and I think we've talked about this on our team before, is people actually taking virtual engagement a lot more seriously. And I work with clients a lot on mindset. So when you're going into a virtual setting and you're going into it thinking, they're not going to take me as seriously as they would if we were sitting in an in-person meeting. They're probably going to check their email, look at their phone. They're probably going to just tune out. Then what happens, a lot of people go into that Zoom meeting or that webinar not showing a lot of enthusiasm because they automatically think this is not going to be as impactful as it would if we were all sitting in the room together. So sometimes they'll come into a virtual setting, their speech is very monotonous, not any natural voice inflections that helps keep people engaged as they're listening to your voice, as they're listening to you. And one of the things that I love now is that post-pandemic, we now have to be just as equally engaged, if not more so, virtually as we would in person. So gone are the days where people think, oh, I can do this virtually. I don't have to put as much prep work into it. I think now more than ever, yes, you do have to put even more prep work into it, because not only are you having to monitor what you're projecting so that your audience will remain engaged and they'll actually get something out of what you're saying, but then you also have to kind of read the room, but do it in a way that's not very distracting so that people can see your authentic self. And to me, being your authentic self is not speaking a certain way necessarily or presenting a certain image. It's about expressing yourself with as little distractions as possible so that people can see your personality, your engagement style, your communication style, and so forth. So there used to be a time where virtual platforms didn't always allow for that because of the mindset that people had about it. But I think now that we're changing our mindset, I think that's going to really help people to not only feel more comfortable and confident on camera virtually, but to also be their more authentic self because they take it more seriously. So those are some of my thoughts and some of my general observations too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm seeing that trend too, where before the pandemic, when people work from home, they were dialing it in literally and figuratively. They didn't spend as much effort on what they were doing. But now I think people recognize we have to be our professional selves when we are joining remotely. And they're recognizing that instead of doing less preparation or winging it, you have to do more, because not only do you have to know the content well and you have to really think about what you're doing, but you have to figure out the technology piece, because if you don't do that, if you're in person in a meeting, you don't have to have that additional layer of how do I read the room with little squares? How do I do a whiteboard? How do I take a poll? How do I mute or unmute? How do I kick someone out of the meeting if they are an interloper and they're not supposed to be there? And that takes additional effort rather than less effort. So people, when they are doing their best work virtually, it really does take more preparation and effort rather than less. So thank you so much. And Michelle, I'm so glad you could join. Do you have any thoughts on authenticity and virtual presentations or virtual meetings that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of mastering the inside game first. So I would say, first of all, understand when your anxiety levels are up, whether it's an indicator of being anxious about environmental mismatch. Are you going before a new audience and you don't know whether or not you have enough alignment with that audience to present as confidently? And then the next step of mastering that inner game is to see how much of that narrative that you may have created for yourself is based on fact and how much of it is a narrative that you created all by yourself. And then from there, I feel like the rest falls into line.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michelle. Do you have any strategies for how people can get out of that narrative if they've created a narrative that may not be serving them well?
Oh, absolutely. Just as I said, you can write down a list of what's a story based on fact and what's likely to be a story based on your imagination. And if there's anything that you can do, be it have a 10-minute conversation with somebody from your prospective audience, whoever's leading the session, to kind of allow yourself to feel more aligned or increase your level of comfort, then do that. Master everything you can before you show up so that you can show up confidently at that appointed time.
Awesome. I love that. One of the things that I often do with clients who are feeling nervous, both for in person, but I think it's important exercise to go through for virtual because we're newer at it, is when you're doing something that's really important and you are anxious about it, write down all of the worst case scenario things. Like, what could possibly happen? Oh, my cat could start meowing. Okay, what do I do if my cat starts meowing in my call?
Right.
Maybe you could think of a joke about it and show a picture of your cat or whatever. And then move on and just accept that your cat's going to be meowing in the backyard, or go to the pet sitter, see if there's some way to do a contactless pet sitter, but just to go through all of the worst case scenarios and either come up with a way to respond or come up with a way to prevent, or, okay, my internet goes down and I can't do it. Okay, so what we do and what we've done, Michelle, for the program that you and I are co-facilitating tonight, we sent the organizers of virtual a copy of the presentation. So if both of us lose internet, we could dial into Zoom and someone else can do the clicking through the slides, and that's how it'll work, and we'll just be on audio. So there's a solution to every catastrophe that could happen. It may not be ideal, but there's a way around it. So think through what those are.
And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves credit in areas where we have experienced success. I think I've also shared with you my very, very first radio interview where I was mortified because I couldn't see my audience. And I was in my laundry room pacing to get rid of my energy, and it came off just fine. So much so that turned into an invitation to become a regular show host that lasted for 7 years. So whenever I find myself in that situation again, I think about how I've maybe survived a similar situation before, or even excelled in a similar situation before.
Excellent. And the one story that I would share about authenticity is I was recently doing a 2-day workshop with lots of breaks, but 2 days for FDA. And about halfway through the first day, I could hear someone, so I use a green screen, as you can see, and my daughter comes into my office. I can hear someone come in and I hear the little footsteps. I'm like, okay, it must be my 9-year-old. And she comes in and she knows when the green screen is up that I'm doing a work engagement. And still she comes around the green screen onto camera. I was like, okay, this must be pretty important. And I was like, hey everyone, this is my daughter, Beatrix. And your little face is there, and everyone did a little wave to her. And I was like, is everything okay, honey? She said, I cannot find the Zoom login for my book club that starts in 1 minute. I said, okay, that is a big problem. I said, your dad has the login. Any chance you could check with him for this? She's like, no, he took the dog for a walk and he's not going to be back for a while. I said, that is a real problem. I said, everyone, going to give us 1 minute here while I look up this. And I pulled up my calendar. I didn't even mute myself. And I read out the Zoom details, and she punched it into her iPad. And I said, all right, great. See, good luck. Have fun at your book club. And she waved everyone. And then we kept going. And, after that, a couple people said, oh my gosh, the Zoom logins for my kids, that's the story of my life. So a couple people said something. And that, it's not a big deal. And then at the end of the program, though, at the end of the second day, I was asking for feedback. And on the evaluation form, one person said, as a mom, I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciated the way that you communicated to your daughter and that you got her what she needed and you didn't prioritize your work over helping her for 1 minute. And I thought that was really cool. And so this thing of authenticity, where we oftentimes think our kids or our cat or whatever is a negative and it's going to detract, everyone else has their own version of the kids and the cat or whatever going on in their life too. And if you just, again, are authentic about it and you are overt about it and you don't make it a big deal and you don't apologize because it's something that we're all experiencing, I think people really do appreciate it. And the other thing is the way that you respond to those things. For example, you might have seen the BBC dad a couple years ago where his kids came in and he was shoving the kid away. I mean, it just made him look like a jerk instead of being a kind, thoughtful person. So if someone was watching this webinar or workshop with me and thinking, oh, how would she respond to me as a client? Like, the way I treat my kid is indicative of the way I treat other human beings. So I think that we have to take that approach when we are working from home and recognizing that everything that we do on our virtual calls is a representation of who we are as a person. And we have to ask, what kind of person do we want to project? And so I would say, just continue to be yourself and don't apologize. Do what you can to prep, and know things are not going to go 100% perfect. Do as much as you can to write out the stories of the negative things, to plan for every contingency. But if things go a little bit wrong, just be overt about it. Tell people what's going on and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I think people are generally understanding and grateful for you being yourself. So I wanted to thank all of you for your expertise. You're an amazing team to have. And I'm so glad that our Spoken with Authority community gets to learn from you. So I'm going to end the call, but I hope that our Spoken with Authority community enjoys this and will also share their experiences and stories, whether it's on Twitter or on comments on LinkedIn, because I think we can all learn from everyone's experiences.